You know, some mysteries just grab you and don't let go. The kind that make you wonder if you stumbled onto a thriller novel instead of real life. And the disappearance of the Solder children. Yeah, that's one of those mysteries. Christmas Eve, 1945, a family's home goes up in flames, but that's just the beginning.
Yeah, it's like someone took a tragic holiday story and then cranked up the strange to 11. You've got this family, the Sodders, forever changed by this horrible night. And almost 80 years later, people are still trying to figure out what really happened.
And you've really gone deep on this one. Eyewitness accounts, official reports, the whole 9 yards. So, what's the verdict? Tragic accident or something more?
Well, to understand, we got to rewind a bit. Picture it. It's late Christmas Eve, 1945. The Sodder family, all 10 kids, are tucked in for the night at their home in Fayetteville, West Virginia. George and Jenny Sodder, the parents, are asleep when a fire erupts. And not just a little fire, we're talking a massive blaze that engulfs the whole house in no time.
Okay, so awful. But houses do catch fire. Old wiring, especially back then, right? But that's not all, is it? Something's off about who actually made it out alive.
You got it. See, George and Jenny, along with 4 of their kids, they escape. But 5 of the children, Maurice, Martha, Louie, Jenny, and Betty, they were trapped inside. The fire department, they said the fire was so intense they said it completely incinerated those kids. No remains.
Hold on, no remains at all. Okay, fire's powerful, but burning 5 bodies to ash? That doesn't sound right.
And that right there, that's red flag number 1 in this whole thing. See, even in a fire as bad as the one that hit the Sodder house, the chances of 5 bodies burning up completely, well, it's almost impossible. Think about it, cremation, they do that in special ovens. Super high heat, like 1,300, 1,800 degrees, to burn a body completely. And even then, there were usually bone fragments left.
So you're saying a regular house fire, even back then, wouldn't get hot enough for that?
Exactly. And here's where it gets even weirder. Because if those kids weren't lost in the fire, what happened to them?
Yeah, where did they go? And then there's that whole thing with the ladder. How does a ladder just disappear?
That's one of the spookiest parts of this whole thing. George, he kept a ladder right by the house, just in case. But when he needed it most, it was gone. Later they found it just tossed down an embankment, like someone wanted to make sure it couldn't be used.
That's chilling. It's like someone was setting them up for this. And it gets worse, right? George's trucks, he couldn't get any of them to start that night.
Nope, not a single one. And he tried. Believe me, he was desperate to reach those kids, even thought about driving up to the windows. But every single truck, all of a sudden, they were duds. Like someone sabotaged them.
And if that wasn't enough, the phone lines were cut too. What are the odds of all that happening on the same night? It's less like an accident and more like a well-planned something.
And this wasn't a case of the fire damaging the lines. Reports say the line to the Sodder house was cut way before that, maybe even before the fire started.
No, that's just shady. It's like someone wanted to make sure no one could call for help, wanted the Sodders completely isolated, but who would do that? And why go after this family?
Those questions have been driving investigators crazy for decades. Some folks point to George's political views. He was an Italian immigrant, pretty outspoken about Mussolini and fascism. This is right after World War II. Tensions were still high. Some think maybe his views made him a target.
It's a scary thought. A family targeted for their beliefs, especially on a night that's supposed to be about peace.
And while we can't say for sure if George's politics played a part, it's important to remember that even small towns like Fayetteville, they weren't immune to what was happening in the world.
So we've got this awful fire, impossible circumstances, rumors of political intrigue. But there's more, isn't there? People said they saw the missing Sodder kids after the fire.
You heard right. And this is where things get really strange. Right after the fire, people started coming forward, saying they saw the Sodder kids in different places, alive and well. One lady worked at a hotel not too far away. She even said she served those kids breakfast the morning after the fire.
Wait, so not only were these kids potentially kidnapped, but they were just out and about the next day. That's both strange and hopeful, isn't it?
It is, but we got to be careful with eyewitness accounts, especially after so many years. Memory is a funny thing, easily influenced by time, by feelings, even by what people read in the papers.
It's like that game Telephone where you whisper a phrase around and it comes out all jumbled up. So how do we know what's real in this case?
It's like putting together a puzzle where some pieces are missing and others might not even belong. You got to look at everything, each piece of evidence, each story, and see if it fits with everything else.
Okay, so possible motives, weird stuff happening the night of the fire, these eyewitness accounts. But then there's that photograph. The one sent to Jenny Sauter years later. Tell me more about that.
Ah, yes, the photograph. Years later, 1968, Jenny gets this mysterious envelope in the mail. Inside, a picture of a young man who looked just like their Louis. On the back, someone wrote, Louis Sauter, I love Brother Frankie. Illa boys, A90132 or 35.
That's giving me chills. What did the Sauter family think about that? It's like something out of the Twilight Zone, this message just appearing out of thin air.
The Sauters, especially Jenny, they were sure it was Louis. They clung to that.
Hmm.
Hired private investigators, the whole 9 yards, trying to find the sender.
Did they find out who sent it? What did it all mean?
Sadly, no. Just like all the other leads in this case, it went nowhere. The investigators took their money and vanished. And that young man in the photo, his identity, that message, it's still a mystery.
It's like every time they got close, every time there was a chance, it just slipped away. Heartbreaking. I can't imagine holding on to hope for so long with all that uncertainty. Did they? Did the Sauters ever think maybe their kids were really gone?
It'd be understandable, right? After all those years, all those dead ends. But honestly, they never gave up. Not really. They kept searching right up until the end of their lives, chasing every lead, every rumor. They even put up a billboard near their house, pictures of the kids, just in case.
That billboard, it's like a symbol, right?
Right.
Of their love, their dedication. Makes you think about the power of hope, even when things seem impossible.
Absolutely. It's incredibly moving, their dedication. But not everyone saw it that way. The lack of answers, all the whispers, it led some people to point fingers at the Sauters themselves.
You mean that theory that the fire was fake? That the Sauter kids were never even in the house? An insurance scam?
That's the one. That theory got around, especially with no real physical evidence and all the strange stuff surrounding the fire itself.
I guess I can see how some folks might think that, but to stage something so horrible just for insurance money, I don't know.
It's a tough one to swallow, for sure. But, and this is important, there's never been any proof that the Sauters were involved in any kind of fraud. In fact, the evidence points the other way.
Like what? What kind of evidence?
Well, everything points to the Sauters being a loving family. There's no history of anything that would even suggest they'd hurt their kids. Plus, the insurance payout, it wasn't much. Not nearly enough to support 5 kids in hiding for years, let alone a lifetime.
That's a good point. To go through all that, the investigations, the accusations, for what? Doesn't add up. It sounds like the Sauters were exactly what they said they were. Heartbroken parents looking for their kids.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to square one. If it wasn't insurance fraud, what was it? We've got a fire that might have been arson, those missing kids, all those eyewitness accounts, and that photograph. It's almost like this case. It doesn't make sense.
Doesn't it? It's like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. But people love a good puzzle. So the theories. We've talked politics, but were there any other motives?
Oh yeah, plenty. And some are wilder than others. One that always gets people talking is organized crime. Now, Fayetteville was a small town, but even small towns weren't immune to the mob, especially back then.
So was George Sauter mixed up with the mob? Did he get in over his head?
There's nothing concrete, but folks who like this theory, they point to George's business. He ran a trucking company, did pretty well. Some think maybe he crossed the mob somehow, wouldn't play ball, and his family paid the price.
Now that's a thought. A reminder that even in the quietest places, there are dark corners. What about that creepy guy, the one people said they saw around the Sauter house before the fire?
Ah, yes, that's another one that gets the imagination going. Some folks said they saw this guy watching the kids getting off the school bus, even trying to sell them Christmas decorations. Others said they saw him near the house on Christmas Eve itself.
Okay, now that's just strange. Random dude hanging around. Was it all just a coincidence, or could he have been involved somehow? It's a lot of sightings in a short time.
Exactly. It's the million-dollar question. Was this just some guy? Or was he part of something bigger? Sadly, no one ever figured out who he was, so we're left wondering if he was just a weird coincidence or something more.
So many dead ends. And that photo, we gotta talk more about that. Do you think it really was Louis? And if it was, who sent it and why?
That picture. It's probably the biggest mystery in this whole case. The Sauters, Jenny especially, they never wavered. They believed that was Louis. They saw something familiar, in his eyes. And, modern facial recognition, it suggests they might be right.
So if it was him, why didn't he come home? Why that cryptic message on the back? It's like he was sending a coded message. Was he trying to keep his family safe? Or was he in danger himself?
We'll probably never know. One theory is that maybe with all the trauma, Louis blocked out the fire, his family, everything. and then seeing his own face in that photo, maybe it brought back these hazy memories, these pieces of a life he couldn't quite grasp.
Wow, that's both fascinating and incredibly sad. To lose your family, your past, just gone. It's unimaginable.
It really is. And even if we never find out everything, one thing's for sure. The Solder kids, their story, it sticks with us. It reminds us that sometimes the biggest mysteries are the ones that leave us with more questions than answers.
It's like the solder case itself, full of twists and turns. It reminds you that life can change in an instant. One minute, it's Christmas Eve, the next. Well, you never know what's coming.
Yeah, you got to remember what was going on back then. World War II was just over. People were hopeful, but still,
Yeah.
on edge. I think the Solder case, it kind of captured that feeling, that undercurrent of anxiety.
Because it happened on Christmas Eve, a night when families are supposed to be together, celebrating. It feels wrong,
Yeah.
Like, it shouldn't have happened then.
Exactly. This horrible thing happening on a night that's supposed to be joyful.
Yeah.
It really got under people's skin. It made them think maybe even in their own homes, they weren't safe.
And even in peacetime, families could just vanish. It's no wonder people were so drawn to this story, and they still are. Do you think that's part of it? This idea that even in a normal place, awful things can happen?
I think you're onto something there. It's like this case. It mixes the ordinary with the unthinkable. We want answers, right? We want things to make sense. But sometimes the more we learn, the less we understand.
And when we don't have answers, our minds tend to fill in the blanks, right?
Exactly. We're hardwired for stories, for connecting the dots. And when we can't, well, it makes us uneasy. We got to know why.
And maybe sometimes the search for the answer is just as important as the answer itself, right? Like the Sodders, they never stopped looking, did they? Every lead, every possibility, no matter how small.
Never gave up hope. And isn't that kind of amazing? Even after losing so much, facing this impossible mystery, the human spirit, it's resilient.
It's both tragic and hopeful at the same time. And it makes you wonder, what really happened that night in Fayetteville? Was it just a terrible, horrible accident? Or did someone somehow do this to the Sodder family?
If only we had a time machine, right? But we don't. We'll probably never know for sure.
Yeah.
Time has a way of blurring the lines, Fact, fiction, it all gets mixed up.
But maybe that's the point, right? Maybe some mysteries are meant to stay mysteries, to make us think, to remind us that we don't always get answers.
Exactly. Sometimes the most powerful stories, they're the ones that leave us wondering. The ones that... Okay, so get this.
Picture a book, right?
Okay.
But it's centuries old and filled with writing that absolutely no one can understand.
Wow.
And it's got these strange illustrations, too, like something straight out of a fantasy novel.
Yeah.
Now, you might think I'm setting up some fictional thriller here,
Right.
but this is the real deal. We're diving into the Voynich manuscript,
Oh, wow.
a centuries-old puzzle that stumped everyone.
Yeah, I've heard of this.
From code breakers to, even the FBI.
Really? The FBI?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
This thing is serious business.
So this isn't just like some old diary then?
No, not at all.
And that's what makes it so fascinating.
Okay.
The Voynich manuscript is this beautifully crafted artifact,
Really?
put together with like real artistry. You can tell it wasn't just some random project.
Ah,
Someone took serious care in making it.
someone took the time.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we know the manuscript itself dates back to the 15th century.
15th century, that's
Which, if you think about it...
right around the time of Da Vinci and Gutenberg.
Oh, wow.
A period of just incredible intellectual ferment, right? Like
Right.
knowledge and creativity were exploding.
Yeah.
And amidst all that, someone was meticulously crafting this.
That's so interesting.
And to think we can't even understand what they were trying to say.
Right.
It's like finding a hidden library, but all the books are written in a language you've never even seen before.
That's wild.
That alone, talk
Yeah.
about frustrating.
It's got to be frustrating for the people studying it,
Oh, I bet.
but also incredibly exciting.
Oh, absolutely. That's what I was going to say. It's like
This is like a siren song for anyone who loves a good puzzle.
a siren song. I like that.
Okay, so let's talk about those tantalizing details then.
Yeah.
What are we actually looking at when we talk about the Voynich manuscript?
Okay, well, the illustrations themselves are incredible.
They're so detailed. Strangely beautiful.
Give us some examples.
Like, for instance, there are pages upon pages of plant illustrations.
Okay.
But here's where it gets weird. Many of these plants don't match any known species.
Wait, so you're telling me
These could be fictional plants,
they could be?
herbs that someone just dreamed up.
It's possible.
Or could we be looking at extinct species?
That's the real question, isn't it?
Documented, Nowhere else in the world.
It's a full-blown botanical mystery.
Wrapped in a linguistic enigma.
Exactly.
Okay? And it wouldn't be a true mystery without a little celestial intrigue, would it?
Right.
What about this astrological angle I keep hearing about?
Yeah, so the manuscript has entire sections dedicated to what look like astrological charts and diagrams.
Okay.
And we see some familiar symbols,
Like what?
like zodiac signs and things like that.
But they're often arranged in these really unique ways,
Interesting.
with unfamiliar annotations that just keep researchers guessing.
So it's like the manuscript is taunting us,
A little bit, yeah.
whispering secrets about the universe, but always just out of reach.
It's like it knows we're watching.
Okay, now I'm seriously hooked.
What about the human figures? Give me the good stuff.
Ah, yes, the human figures. This is where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm ready.
The manuscript depicts these human figures in all these various poses.
Like what? Doing jumping jacks.
Haha! No, not quite.
Some of them appear to be engaged in, like, rituals or ceremonies.
Okay.
Others are shown interacting with those strange plants we talked about, or with the astronomical charts.
Fascinating.
Some scholars think they could be clues about medical practices of the time.
So like early doctors.
Maybe. Even early forms of alchemy.
Alchemy.
Or even something beyond our current understanding.
Okay, so we've got mysterious plants, cryptic star charts, and enigmatic human figures.
It's quite the collection.
It's like the manuscript took a crash course in mystery writing, grabbed one of every trope, and combined them into this beautifully illustrated package.
And yet we still have no idea what it means.
Right. Seeing all these clues, it just makes me even more desperate to know.
Yeah.
What does it all mean?
When? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And let me tell you, some of the most brilliant minds on the planet have dedicated themselves to trying to figure that out.
All right, well, let's dive into those theories then.
What are some of the top contenders? We're talking secret societies, lost civilizations, maybe even...
Dare I say it, aliens.
Whoa, no, hold on there. Let's not jump to hyperspace just yet.
Although you have to admit, the thought is intriguing.
Okay, true.
But one of the most common theories you see is that the Voynich manuscript is like this encyclopedic guide.
Okay.
You know, maybe like a medical text or a compendium of herbal remedies and stuff like that.
Yeah, I can see that. We've got the detailed botanical illustrations, possible depictions of like medicinal practices.
Yeah.
Kind of tracks.
Exactly. And some scholars even think it might have been created by like a secretive group.
Ooh.
Maybe alchemists or proto-scientists, people who would have wanted to guard their knowledge carefully.
Right. Secret knowledge hidden in plain sight.
Exactly.
Oh, I love it. But you know me, I gotta ask.
What about the hoax possibility? I mean, with a mystery this big, there are always going to be folks out there who think it's all a big fake, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You're right to be skeptical.
Yeah.
You know, critical thinking is like essential when you're dealing with the unknown.
Right.
The hoax theory definitely has its proponents.
They say that the whole manuscript is like this clever fabrication that's designed to mislead and mystify people.
But here's the thing. The sheer effort involved in creating something this complex, it's almost unimaginable.
So you're saying this isn't just someone doodling in their basement for fun?
Hardly. We're talking about a level of artistry, botanical knowledge, linguistic ingenuity. It's really hard to fathom, especially back in the 15th century.
Right.
The complexity of the script, the detail in the illustrations, the sheer volume of the thing. It suggests years, maybe even decades of dedicated work.
Wow.
To what end?
To fool a handful of scholars centuries later, I'm not so sure.
Okay, so maybe not a hoax. But what about the idea of it being a code? That has to be the most exciting possibility, right?
Has anyone actually tried to crack this thing?
Oh, you better believe it. The Voynich manuscript has attracted some of the world's best code breakers.
Really?
I'm talking CIA, NSA. Even the FBI have taken a crack at this thing.
Wait, the FBI? Seriously?
Seriously.
Wow.
And these aren't just like cryptography hobbyists either. We're talking the pros here.
They've thrown everything at it.
Frequency analysis, pattern recognition, even experimental algorithms designed specifically for this manuscript.
And yet the code, if that's even what it is, remains completely unbroken.
And with all our modern tech.
Even with all that, it's like the creator just deliberately sidestepped every known encryption method of the time.
Wow. Even the pros struck out. Okay, now that is impressive. But if it's not a hoax,
Yeah.
and it's not a code that we can crack, what else could it be? What other possibilities are even out there?
Well, that brings us to one of the most tantalizing theories of all.
Hit me at it.
The idea that the Voynich manuscript isn't written in code at all.
But in a lost language.
Okay, now we're talking.
A lost language. That's the kind of stuff that gets my imagination going. I'm picturing ancient civilizations, lost cities.
Maybe even a portal to another dimension.
You never know.
Right.
But even without the interdimensional travel, just imagine a civilization lost to history. Their knowledge and culture preserved only in this one enigmatic manuscript.
It's a long shot, for sure.
Yeah.
But if it's true, the Voynich manuscript would be more than just a puzzle. It'd be a window into a world we never even knew existed.
It would be incredible.
Okay, now that is a theory that'll keep me up at night.
But I got to ask.
Yeah.
Are there any theories out there that are, well, let's just say a little more out there?
Well, for those who like to entertain the more unconventional possibilities, there's always the extraterrestrial theory.
Uh-huh. I knew it.
Aliens. Okay, you have to tell me more about this one.
It's a theory. Like,
Yeah.
It's important to be skeptical, of course.
Of course.
But some theorists say the manuscript's strange symbols and illustrations.
Particularly the ones with those unidentifiable plants.
Right.
And like the astronomical phenomenon.
They say those could point to an origin beyond our planet.
Okay, I'm officially on board. Lay it on me.
What are we talking? Messages from some advanced civilization, star charts from another galaxy.
Some even go so far as to suggest that it might be.
And I know this is venturing into pure speculation here.
Go on.
A guidebook for navigating interdimensional travel.
Oh, okay. Even if that last one's a bit of a stretch.
You gotta admit, the fact that people are even considering these possibilities says something about this manuscript.
Oh, absolutely. The Voynich manuscript reminds us that even with all our advancements, in science and technology,
Right.
there's still mysteries out there that we just don't understand.
It's kind of humbling, isn't it? To be reminded of how much we don't know.
Yeah.
But it's also exciting. So with all these mind-blowing theories floating around, what do you think is the most likely explanation?
You've spent a lot of time with this manuscript. What's your gut telling you?
It's so tempting to pick a favorite. To go all in on one theory.
No.
But honestly, I think the real beauty of the Voynich manuscript, it's the ambiguity. It's a blank canvas. We can project our own curiosity onto it.
I like that. And as much as I love a good answer, a nice, neat solution, part of me kind of hopes it stays unsolved, at least for a while longer.
Right.
It's a reminder that there's still a sense of wonder and mystery in the world.
Absolutely. And think about all the people who've been drawn to it. Like generations of researchers, cartographers, historians, linguists.
All fascinated by this one artifact. They pore over these pages year after year, determined to unlock its secrets.
It's really incredible. And what gets me is there's no big cash prize waiting for whoever figures it out right.
Right.
It's pure intellectual curiosity.
It really is.
Just the drive to know for the sake of knowing.
The Voynich manuscript shows us that knowledge isn't always about finding those definitive answers. Sometimes it's about embracing the mystery, the thrill of the chase, the realization that some things just can't be easily explained.
One researcher said that working on the manuscript is like falling in love with a ghost.
Oh, wow.
You can spend years with it, learn every detail.
But still not truly know it.
That's a perfect way to put it. And hey, who knows? Maybe someday someone will discover that missing piece.
Right.
Maybe it'll be a new scientific discovery. A fresh perspective on ancient languages.
Or even just stumbling across some forgotten archive could be all it takes to finally unlock those secrets.
Wouldn't that be amazing to see this centuries-old mystery finally solved? To know what those pages actually say?
It would be incredible. Sometimes I think maybe the key is something really simple.
So obvious that we've just overlooked it this whole time.
Like what?
I don't know. A shift in perspective, a new way of looking at the symbols.
Or even just a stroke of luck.
Exactly. But then again, maybe the real treasure isn't the solution itself.
But the journey, all those hours spent unraveling this intricate tapestry of knowledge and imagination, human ingenuity.
For a manuscript no one can read, it sure does have a lot to say, doesn't it?
It does. It's a story that's still being written.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the mysteries of the Voynich manuscript.
You ever heard of like a real-life ghost ship? Not, the kind you see in movies, but an actual ship just sailing along, totally empty.
Ooh, okay, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, today we're getting into the Mary Celeste. Probably one of the strangest sea stories out there.
Oh yeah, for sure. A total head-scratcher.
So picture this, it's 1872 December, and this other ship, the Dea Gracia, they come across the Mary Celeste just drifting out there near the Azores. And get this, everything on board is totally fine, like supplies, cargo, all untouched.
Right.
But not a single person on board. It's like they just vanished.
And that's the thing, right? It's not like a shipwreck where you can kind of, I don't know, piece together what might have happened.
Yeah.
This is a perfectly good ship, just deserted.
Yeah, and it's not like it was some tiny little boat either. This was a brigantine, 2 masts, not really known for being a smooth sail. And the captain, Benjamin Briggs, he was supposed to be at the helm. He was a really experienced sailor.
So experienced.
Had his wife Sarah with him, their little girl Sophia, and then 7 crew members. Left New York in November 1872, headed to Genoa, Italy. Whole cargo hold full of commercial alcohol.
See, even back then, crossing the Atlantic, it was risky business, right? Storms, you could get lost, people got sick.
Yeah.
But a ship like the Mary Celeste, with a captain like Briggs, that's what throws you for a loop.
Totally. So we've got a ship fully stocked, a missing lifeboat, and 0 signs of a struggle.
Right. Makes you wonder.
Oh, for sure. And the theories about what happened range from totally plausible to, well, let's just say out there.
Huh. Out there. I like it. But before we jump into alien abductions and sea monsters, let's start with the more realistic stuff.
Sounds good.
So one of the big ones is an explosion. Remember that whole alcohol cargo?
Yeah.
Could leaking fumes have caused a panic? Maybe they thought the whole ship was going up in flames.
It's definitely dramatic, right?
Yeah.
Plays into that whole fear of the unknown thing we all have.
Totally.
But, and this is the big but, the cargo was totally fine, like completely intact, no fire, no damage, nothing.
Plus, think about it. If they were that afraid of an explosion, wouldn't they have gotten as far away as possible?
That's true.
Why leave in a lifeboat? Only to maybe come back later. And the lifeboat, by the way, never found. Doesn't really line up.
Good point. Okay, so maybe not an explosion, but what about pirates? Classic, right? Valuable cargo. Gotta be pirates.
Always a good suspect.
Right. Maybe they took over the Mary Celeste, kidnapped everyone on board, and sailed off into the sunset with all the loot.
Okay, I mean, who doesn't love a good pirate story? But this one, it kind of falls apart when you look at the details.
How so?
Well, pirates, they were all about the bottom line, right? Why take the whole ship and all the people when you can just grab the valuables and go?
I guess that makes sense.
And why leave behind a perfectly good ship? And all that alcohol, it just doesn't add up.
All right, so if it wasn't an explosion or pirates, what about, like, a mutiny? You know, classic seafaring story. The crew turns on the captain, maybe someone gets thrown overboard.
Yeah, it's a good one. The whole being stuck on a ship in the middle of nowhere?
Exactly. Could definitely lead to some drama.
Definitely. But, like the other theories, it doesn't quite fit with what we find on the Mary Celeste.
How so?
Well, think about it. A mutiny means someone's taking over, right? Things are going to get messy.
Yeah, you'd think there'd be some evidence of a fight.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But the ship, it's almost too perfect, you know? No blood, no signs of a struggle, everything's in its place.
It's like they all just decided to go for a swim and never came back.
Right. And that's the thing, it's just so strange. Makes you wonder if we're even on the right track with these individual events.
What do you mean?
Like, what if instead of one big thing, it was a bunch of smaller things that just kind of snowballed?
Okay, now you're really piquing my interest.
Think about it. You're on this ship, already a little on edge because, well, the ocean's a scary place, right?
Right.
And then, let's say they hit some rough weather, maybe a near miss with a big wave, or even a small fire that they put out quickly. Something to really shake them up.
And being out on the open ocean, no way to contact anyone, that would mess with your head, for sure.
Exactly. You're isolated, vulnerable. Now imagine Captain Briggs. He was this very religious man, right? Maybe he starts seeing these events as, like, signs, you know, divine warnings.
So now you've got this perfect storm brewing, bad luck, fear, maybe even some religious guilt thrown in.
And that's where things could take a really tragic turn. Imagine, in a moment of pure panic, Briggs decides the ship is cursed.
Oh, wow.
He orders everyone into the lifeboat, thinking that's their only chance, maybe to reach an island, send for help.
But the lifeboat, it wouldn't stand a chance against the open ocean, not in rough seas.
And just like that, a perfectly good ship becomes a ghost ship, lost to the same sea they thought would save them.
It's a sad thought, but it does fit with what we know. No damage on the Mary Celeste, the missing lifeboat.
It's all speculation, of course. We can't discount other possibilities. The sea works in mysterious ways. But to me, this idea, it speaks to how fragile we are, you know, how fear and isolation can lead to even the most experienced sailor making a desperate choice.
It really makes you think, huh? All these theories, all these possibilities, but we're still left wondering what really happened on the Mary Celeste.
And that's the thing about the Mary Celeste, isn't it? It reminds us that we don't have all the answers. Even with all our technology, all our knowledge, some things remain a mystery.
Kind of humbling when you think about it.
It is, but it's also exciting in a way. It means there's still so much out there to discover, to understand.
I like that way of looking at it. So instead of searching for one definitive answer, maybe it's about exploring all the possibilities, asking the questions, even if we never know for sure.
Exactly. The Mary Celeste, it forces us to confront the unknown, you know? And the sea, it's a powerful force. It can hide the truth even after all these years.
It's true when you think about all the stories, the secrets the ocean holds. Makes you realize just how small we are, you know?
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder that nature, it has its own rules. And sometimes those rules are beyond our comprehension.
It's almost like with the Mary Celeste, the not knowing, it becomes part of the story, makes it even more fascinating.
I think you're right. It captures our imagination, makes us think about the fragility of life, the power of the natural world.
It does. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, but I feel like we're just scratching the surface of this mystery.
Always more to explore, right? And that's the beauty of it. The Mary Celeste, it's a reminder that there are still mysteries out there, stories waiting to be told.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe someday we'll uncover a new piece of the puzzle, a clue that changes everything. But until then, the Mary Celeste will continue to sail the seas of our imagination.
A ghost ship forever frozen in time. All right, so picture this with me. It's November 24th, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving, actually. Everyone's excited for turkey and family, right? Well, not quite everyone. This guy calls himself Dan Cooper. He's got other plans. He hijacks a plane, gets his hands on 200 grand, and then, get this, just vanishes. And not like poof, magic trick, but he jumps out mid-flight over the Pacific Northwest. Never found, well, not definitively at least. Crazy, right? And that's what we're diving into today. The D.B. Cooper case. One for the books, that's for sure.
You know, what gets me about this case, even after all this time, is just how different it was. Most hijackings, they're messy, fueled by panic. Not Cooper. This guy was ice cold, calm, collected. Heck, some even say he was polite to the crew. Can you imagine? But under that calm facade, a plan. A meticulously thought out, utterly wild plan.
He knew what he was doing, that's for sure. Like even his choice of plane, the Boeing 727, that wasn't random.
Not a chance. The 727 had a very particular feature that Cooper was after. Aft stairs. These weren't your regular front door stairs. These bad boys could be lowered during flight. And that little detail, it was the linchpin to his whole escape.
Most hijackers, they're all about hostages, negotiations, the drama. But Cooper, he knew exactly how this was going to play out. Him jumping out of a plane, money in tow.
And his demands, they lined up perfectly. 200 grand, which back then that was a king's ransom. But he also wanted 4 parachutes. No room for error in his book.
So the plane lands in Seattle, refuels, they let the passengers go. Man, can you imagine being on that flight? Thanksgiving dinner probably never tasted quite the same, huh?
I can only imagine the collective sigh of relief from those passengers. But for the crew, the ordeal was far from over. Cooper, cash and parachutes ready, he tells the pilots. Set course for Mexico City and fly low. And this is where things get really good.
Because over the wilderness of Washington State, in the pitch black with the storm raging outside, Cooper makes his move.
Heads to the back of the plane, lowers those aft stairs, and just like that, poof, gone.
What a moment that must have been, right? Jumping into the unknown like that. Was he confident? Scared out of his mind? Did he have an escape route planned once he hit the ground? We'll never truly know. No one actually saw him jump. Between the darkness, the awful weather, and the plane bouncing around, it was impossible to say for sure where he landed.
It's like the storm just swallowed him whole. And vanished he did. They launched a massive search, hundreds of square miles covered, agents on the ground, helicopters in the air, you name it. They found nothing. No Cooper, no parachute, no money. It was as if the wilderness just decided to keep its secrets.
And so the case, it went cold. Years passed, the mystery deepened. Did he make it? Did he die out there? Was it all just a big, elaborate failure? Everyone had a theory. But the truth, that remained elusive. Then, nearly a decade later, something happened that breathed new life into the whole D.B. Cooper saga.
Yeah, so 1980 rolls around. This kid, he's playing along the Columbia River, about 50 miles or so from where they think Cooper jumped. And get this, the kid finds a bundle of cash, partially buried. Turns out it's Cooper's ransom money, or at least part of it.
Talk about a curveball. You'd think finding the money, that'd be it, case closed, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But it really just blew the whole thing wide open again.
Yeah, because now what?
Because now you've got even more questions. Like, did he survive the jump? Did he stash this cash and then something else happened to him? Or did the money get there some other way?
I I mean, it's possible, right, that maybe it wasn't even on him when he jumped. Maybe it fell out of the plane, right? Or
Yeah.
got washed downstream somehow over all those years.
It's not out of the question. The way they found it, partially buried on the riverbank, it definitely adds another layer to think about. But no matter how it got there, that little discovery just threw more fuel on the fire of the Cooper mystery.
And I think that's what keeps people hooked, isn't it? The mystery of who D.B. Cooper really was. Was he some expert skydiver? Ex-military, maybe, with parachute training? Some kind of modern-day Robin Hood?
Well, that lack of a real identity, it's a big part of what makes this case so fascinating. And it's led to a whole lot of speculation, that's for sure.
Some theories are more believable than others, though, right? Like,
That's
you'd think the guy had to know something about parachuting. You don't just jump out of a plane at night in a storm over who knows what kind of terrain on a whim, right?
Yeah, it takes guts, that's for sure. And planning, which has led some to believe he might have had military experience, specifically maybe airborne operations or survival training.
Right. And then there's the question of whether he had help on the ground. Like, did someone meet him? Did he have a whole network of people helping him vanish?
The accomplice angle, it definitely adds intrigue. Could explain how he managed to disappear so completely.
So we've got maybe a skydiver, ex-military, maybe a whole team helping him. But then there are the really out there Cooper theories, like we're talking CIA involvement, secret identities, the works.
It's easy to dismiss those as far-fetched, sure, but the fact that those theories exist at all, it just goes to show you how powerful the Cooper mystery really is. People want answers, even if it means believing the unbelievable sometimes.
I guess that's the thing about a good mystery. It gets your mind working. Makes you question everything.
It's true. The FBI might have officially closed the D.B. Cooper case back in 2016, but the speculation, oh, that hasn't stopped. Not even a little bit.
And I doubt it ever will. You've got people out there still digging into it, analyzing everything, trying to crack the code. What do you think it is about this case specifically that still fascinates people, even after all these years?
It really is wild, isn't it? I mean, the FBI called it quits, but everyone else is still hooked. Like D.B. Cooper's this folk hero or something. Oh, totally. He's practically a legend now. You know, more than just a criminal case file. We're talking books, documentaries, even a TV show. D.B. Cooper's got it all.
It's true. And it's not just the big stuff either, right? I mean, online. People are obsessed. Flight logs, weather reports from that night. I even saw a whole forum thread debating what kind of tie he was wearing.
It shows you the power of a good mystery, doesn't it? We can't resist a puzzle, especially one this good. Daring escape, a whole lot of unknowns, and that little voice in the back of your head that goes, we may never know.
Yeah, it's like a real-life detective story where everyone's Sherlock Holmes. But without that satisfying ending you usually get.
That's the beauty of it, though. The story doesn't end. We get to write our own ending. Did Cooper escape? Bite the dust somewhere? Maybe he's out there right now, sipping a martini, laughing at us all.
Makes you think, doesn't it? Maybe that's the real hook. Never knowing for sure just makes it more intriguing.
Could be. It keeps those theories coming, you know?
Yeah.
Every generation adds their own spin to it. The legend lives on.
We've talked about the how, the who, but I keep coming back to the why. What made this guy do it? Was it just about the money? Or was there something more going on?
That's the million-dollar question, all right? Greed. Maybe he craved adventure. Or maybe it was something darker, some past he was running from. We might never have that answer.
And you know what? Maybe that's okay. Maybe that unanswered question is what keeps this whole story alive.
Keeps us guessing, keeps us searching. D.B. Cooper might remain an enigma, but that's what makes him so fascinating.
Well said. The deeper you dive with D.B. Cooper, it seems like the more questions pop up. But hey, isn't that the sign of a truly great mystery? It sticks with you. You find yourself coming back to it thinking, maybe this time I'll figure it out. So next time you're on a plane, take a second to think about D.B. Cooper, the man who vanished into thin air, leaving a trail of mystery in his wake. It's a story that still captivates, still makes us wonder. And that's the beauty of it all, isn't it? Ever get that feeling? You know that feeling where, like, truth is just way stranger than anything you could dream up?
Oh, absolutely.
It's like we think we've got it all figured out, and then bam, the universe throws a curveball, a real head-scratcher. And that's what we're diving into today.
I love those.
A mystery, a real doozy that'll make you look at lighthouses a little differently.
Oh, yeah.
Lighthouses, isolation, the raw power of the sea. Buckle up, because this one's got it all.
Well, you've definitely piqued my interest. Let's hear it.
We're talking about the Flannan Isles Lighthouse,
Okay.
lost out there in the vastness of the Atlantic,
Yeah.
and even the name Flannan Isles. It sounds ominous, doesn't it?
It does have a certain ring to it. Yeah.
It's December 1900. Picture this. A cluster of these, like, craggy islands west of Scotland, just getting pounded by wind and waves. They call them the Seven Hunters, but honestly, I'm thinking Seven Spooks might be a better fit.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
And that right there, that's where our story unfolds.
Hmm.
So this lighthouse, it's manned by 3 keepers. But these aren't like new recruits. These guys are seasoned. They know the sea like the back of their hand. We've got James Ducat, the principal keeper, a steady presence, Thomas Marshall, the second assistant, and Donald MacArthur, known for his strength, his resilience. These were not men easily shaken.
Solid crew.
Right. So December 26th, 1900, a routine check is due at the lighthouse.
Okay.
What happens next? Well, let's just say it's not what anyone expected.
All right, I'm hooked. What went down?
So picture this relief vessel.
Okay.
It's approaching the lighthouse, expecting, that familiar sight, the lantern cutting through the gloom, that beacon in the darkness. But there's nothing.
Nothing.
No light, no sound, just silence.
No, that's just creepy.
Yeah, it gets creepier. So they make it to the lighthouse, right? They're calling out, hoping for some sign, any sign. Nothing.
Oh, man. So what did they find when they got inside?
Well, that's where things get really strange. Because what they found inside wasn't chaos, wasn't destruction. It was ordinary.
Ordinary how?
The door, unlocked. They walk inside, and there's a half-eaten meal sitting on the table. Like someone just stepped away for a minute. The lamps were all prepped, ready to be lit. But here's the thing. The keepers' coats, gone.
Gone, as in
Missing.
vanish.
In December, on a desolate island in the middle of the Atlantic. Yeah, that's not your everyday missing coat situation.
Not even close. And this, my friend, is just the tip of the iceberg. Because the real clues, the ones that have fueled over a century of speculation, those were found in the lighthouse logbook. And trust me, it's like reading a ghost story.
All right, so we're talking about this logbook, right? And it's not just some dry, daily checklist. This thing is spooky.
Lay it on me.
Okay, picture this. You crack open this logbook. It's weathered. You can practically smell the salt on it. This is the last anyone's heard from these guys. December 12th, there's an entry by Thomas Marshall, the second assistant. He describes this severe storm, like really laying it on thick how bad it is. Okay, makes sense. They're out there on the edge of the world. Storms are probably pretty intense.
Exactly. You'd expect them to be used to it, right? But he goes on and he mentions James Ducat, the principal keeper, the rock of the crew, this guy saying he's been very quiet. And then, get this, he writes that Donald MacArthur.
The strong one.
Yeah, the one known for keeping his cool. He's been, and I quote, crying.
Crying? What could make a seasoned lighthouse keeper crack like that? I mean, besides a decent onion chopping session, I can't think of many things.
Right, and that's the thing. See, researchers, they dug into this. They wanted to know what these guys were dealing with. So they checked the meteorological records from around that time, what was the weather actually like?
Don't tell me it was sunny skies and calm seas.
Pretty much. There's no mention of any major storms in the area, nothing that lines up with what's described in the logbook.
Hold on. So they're experiencing this terrifying storm, one that's got this tough guy in tears, but there's no record of it ever happening.
None whatsoever. It's like this invisible tempest just swallowed them whole.
Okay, now that's just, I don't even know. It's like something out of a movie, this phantom storm they're all experiencing.
It gets weirder because the logbook keeps talking about this storm for days, right? It's all anyone can write about. But then December 15th, boom, last entry, it just says, storm ended, sea calm, God is over all.
I mean, it's haunting. What do you even make of something like that?
I don't even know where to start. Some people say it's like, accepting their fate. Others say maybe it was some shared delusion. Being stuck out there can do strange things to the mind.
No, I hear you. So let's recap. We've got a missing crew, a perfectly normal-looking lighthouse, those coats, gone without a trace. On top of that, we've got this phantom storm brewing in the logbook and a cryptic last message. What in the world are we supposed to make of all of this?
Right. It's like trying to put together a puzzle, but half the pieces are from a different box. Let's start with the simplest explanation, see if it holds water. A rogue wave.
Okay, I've heard of those. So you're thinking they were out there, maybe on the cliffs, and this massive wave just swept them away.
It's possible. The western cliffs of the Flannan Isles, those things are completely exposed to the full force of the Atlantic. A wave could come out of nowhere, One big enough to take out 3 men, and it wouldn't even register on the mainland.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But wouldn't a wave that powerful have smashed the lighthouse to pieces, too?
That's the thing. It should have, shouldn't it? But when the relief crew got there, the lighthouse was pretty much intact. And then you've got the missing coats. If a storm was whipping up, those seasoned keepers, they would have their coats, right? It's not adding up.
Not at all. So if it wasn't some, like, freak of nature,
Yeah.
what about something more human? Like maybe they turned on each other out there. Cabin fever, you know?
It's a thought, isn't it? Isolation does funny things to people. And that entry about Ducat being quiet, MacArthur crying, maybe there was some tension building up.
Yeah, like maybe it finally boiled over.
Exactly. But here's the catch. There wasn't a single sign of a struggle in the lighthouse. No broken furniture, no signs of a fight. And how could one of them overpower the other two, get rid of the bodies, without leaving a single trace? It's just not adding up.
So, not a waves, not a fight. What else could it be?
This is where things get really interesting, right? It's like we're about to step into one of those spooky stories those sailors used to tell, right?
It's hard not to think about, isn't it? I mean, even before the lighthouse, the Flannan Isles had this reputation.
Oh, yeah, haunted seas, phantom ships. People would practically whisper the name. It's like the whole place is just shrouded in mystery.
Generations of sailors telling those stories, passing them down. You can't just ignore that kind of history.
So what are we talking? Sea monsters, ancient curses.
Well, some people, they think maybe the keepers, they ran afoul of something, like a spirit, something angry about the lighthouse, maybe.
Like they disturbed its domain or something. Exactly. There are others, they point to those old stories about, fey creatures or maybe even some kind of sea god with a taste for humans.
Okay, I can see it. The fog rolls in, the spectral ship emerges, but as much as I love a good ghost story, I have to ask, is there anything at all that actually supports these theories? Or is this all just, conjecture?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's definitely intriguing, but when you get right down to it, there's no hard evidence, no smoking gun. It's just these strange coincidences, a lot of what-ifs and not a lot of answers.
All right. So no sea monsters, no angry spirits, at least not that we can prove. But what about just the human element being stuck out there on this rock in the middle of nowhere for weeks at a time? It's got to do something to you, right?
Oh, absolutely. Imagine it, just the sound of the waves, the wind howling, staring out into that darkness for weeks on end.
Yeah, you go a little stir crazy.
More than a little, probably. And then you add in the winter the lack of sunlight. You're in close quarters, day in, day out. The mind starts playing tricks on you.
So you're thinking, maybe that's what happened, that they all just kind of lost it a little bit.
It's possible, isn't it? Sensory deprivation, stress, the weight of those spooky stories they'd heard, it could create a shared reality. Suddenly, what's real and what's in your head, it all starts to blur together.
And that could explain the storm they described in the logbook. Maybe it wasn't real. Not in the traditional sense, anyway.
Exactly.
So we've got rogue waves, we've got the idea that maybe they fought amongst themselves, spooky sea monsters, and even the power of the human mind itself, all potentially playing a role. And yet, after all this time, the Flannan Isles lighthouse, it remains this unsolved puzzle. It's almost as if the truth is just gone.
Maybe that's what makes it so fascinating, It's this reminder that even with all our technology, all our fancy gadgets, there are still things we just can't explain. Mysteries that keep us guessing.
It definitely makes you think. Out there, somewhere, is the real story of what happened to those keepers. Lost to time.
It is a reminder, isn't it? Some stories, they don't have a neat ending. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the unanswered questions, the mystery. Maybe that's where the real intrigue is.
Maybe that's the point. To remind us that there are still things in this world that defy explanation. And sometimes, the best we can do is just listen to the stories and wonder. It's, it's every parent's worst nightmare, isn't it?
Right.
Your kids are out playing somewhere familiar, somewhere you think they're safe, and then gone.
Yeah.
Just like that. And that's the reality the Beaumont family's been living with for decades now.
Right.
And that's what that's what we're diving into today.
Yeah.
The Beaumont children, it's a case, it still sends chills down your spine, even after all this time.
And it's interesting you say that about it being every parent's nightmare, because what I find so striking, so truly heartbreaking about this case is how utterly normal it all seemed at first.
Right.
I mean, it was Australia Day, January 26, 1966, a summer day, carefree, And the Beaumonts, they decided to do what so many families were doing that day, head to the beach.
Of course, yeah.
Glen Elg Beach. Well, it was practically their backyard, just a stone's throw from their home in Adelaide.
Exactly. And that's what makes it even more unsettling, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't some, I don't know, some remote location or anything.
Yeah.
So for those who might not be as familiar with the case, who were the Beaumont children?
So there was Jane, the eldest, 9 years old, by all accounts, a bright and responsible girl. Then there was Arna, 7 years old, a little quieter maybe than her older sister.
Okay.
And then bringing up the rear, you had little Grant, just 4 years old, bouncing off the walls with that, that infectious energy only a 4-year-old can have.
Oh, I know it well. 3 kids, each with their own personalities, their whole lives ahead of them. It's just heartbreaking.
It really is. And to really understand how normal this day was, we have to remember that the kids, they'd taken the bus to Glen Elg Beach by themselves before.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It was the kind of freedom a lot of kids had in those days. Something that seems almost unfathomable now.
Right. Totally different time. Different sense of, I don't know, community trust back then, which I guess is what makes their sudden disappearance so jarring. So let's talk about that day. What do we know about their movements?
Well, witnesses saw them playing on the beach that morning, just like any other group of kids enjoying a summer day.
Right.
There was no sign of a struggle, no indication that anything was amiss. And then around midday, they were just gone.
Gone. Just like that.
Yeah.
I'm getting chills just thinking about it.
Their mother, Nancy Beaumont, had given them some money, enough for bus fare and some treats. She expected them home in the afternoon.
Of course, yeah.
But as the hours ticked by and it got to be dinner time and they still weren't back, that's when the panic starts to set in.
I can only imagine that agonizing, not knowing where your children are. It's just, I can't even imagine.
And you have to remember, this is 1966. There are no cell phones, no way to instantly reach out to track them down. It's just, the growing anxiety, the frantic searching of the neighborhood, all while knowing that time is slipping away. Reading the accounts from that time, it's palpable, that feeling.
Ugh, that dread just seeping into everything.
Yeah.
So what happens next? When do the authorities get involved?
And here's the part that's so perplexing. He wasn't hiding in the shadows. He wasn't acting suspicious or anything. In fact, witnesses said he was playing with the children, seemed friendly, even helped them pack up their things.
He's helping them pack up.
Yes.
See, that's what I don't get. It just seems so strange, so counterintuitive to what we usually think of with, abductions.
Exactly. And that's what makes this detail so significant. Most abductions don't involve this kind of seemingly innocent interaction beforehand.
Right.
And it's this aspect of the case that has fueled endless debate. Did the children go willingly with this man? Were they coerced in some way that, I don't know, maybe didn't raise any red flags for those watching?
Okay, so we had this unidentified man, seemingly friendly, but his presence is clearly linked to the children's disappearance. What other clues do investigators have to work with?
Well, this is where we introduce another layer of oddness to this already strange story, the mystery of the 1 pound note.
Okay, a 1 pound note. Now, walk me through this. Why is this little detail such a big deal in the Beaumont case?
Well, you see, a shopkeeper, she came forward later, said that Jane, the eldest, had come into her store that afternoon with a man who matched the description given by those witnesses at the beach.
Okay.
And get this, Jane, she used a 1 pound note to buy pastries.
Wait, hold on. The kids, they weren't carrying that much money when they left home, right?
Exactly.
So where did this money come from? Did this man give it to her? Was it really Jane? Could this be a case of, mistaken identity, just muddying the waters even more?
Now, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? This detail, after all these years, it's almost impossible to verify, and it just throws a wrench into everything. Was it, a simple act of kindness from the man?
Right, trying to gain their trust or something.
Maybe? Or was it more calculated than that? Was it part of some plan that was already in motion?
Just it's like he planted that 1 pound note, knowing that it might not be traced back, but would leave everyone wondering. It's like something out of a movie or something.
And it's that what if that makes this detail so tantalizing.
Speaking of tantalizing, this case, it has to have generated a ton of theories over the years.
Yeah.
Where do investigators even begin with something like this?
Oh, you're absolutely right. The Beaumont case, it's practically a breeding ground for speculation.
Yeah.
And it's understandable, right? The human mind, it hates not having answers.
Right.
Especially when it comes to something as, as heartbreaking as the disappearance of
So,
children,
of course.
we crave explanations, patterns, anything to make sense of the senseless.
Makes sense. So besides this mysterious man at the beach and this whole 1 pound note thing, were there any other, like, strong leads
Yeah.
or suspects even?
Oh, absolutely. Every so often, a new lead emerges,
Yeah.
a tip comes in, or someone, draws a connection to another unsolved case from that era.
Right, right.
Sadly, though, none of those avenues have really panned out, at least not conclusively.
You mentioned other unsolved cases. Any names that, that we might recognize?
Well, we can't really talk about this case without mentioning one name in particular, a name that casts a long shadow over this case, really over Australian true crime in general.
Are you talking about Bevan Spencer von Einem,
Right, Von Einem.
convicted child killer? And he was active in the Adelaide area, right? Around the time the Beaumont children disappeared. Just chilling to even think about.
Yeah. And his profile, tragically, it did fit certain aspects of the case.
Right.
For years, he was considered a prime suspect.
I bet investigators were, they had to have been looking for any little thing connecting him to the Beaumont case.
They were. And while he was questioned about the Beaumont children, he always denied any involvement. And despite all the scrutiny, all the investigating, no direct evidence ever emerged that definitively linked him to the Beaumont children.
Which, gosh, that has to be incredibly frustrating for everyone involved,
Yeah.
to be so close, to have a known offender like von Einem in the mix, but no concrete link. Oof, just awful.
It really does highlight the, how should I say it, the deeply unsatisfying nature of this mystery.
Yeah.
You have these, these compelling threads, the unidentified man, that 1 pound note, Von Einem being in Adelaide at the time.
Right.
But none of them quite weave a complete tapestry. It's almost like you've got a jigsaw puzzle.
Okay.
But some of the pieces, they might belong to entirely different puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
It's intriguing, sure, but almost impossible to actually assemble a clear picture from.
It really makes you realize that, real life doesn't always tie things up in a neat little bow.
It really doesn't. And the lack of that resolution, that lingering ambiguity, it can be deeply unsettling.
Oh,
It
yeah.
forces us to acknowledge the limits of our understanding, that there's a very real possibility that some questions may never have definitive answers.
And we're just left grappling with endless possibilities. Was it a planned abduction? Was it a crime of opportunity? Was it something else entire? The Beaumont case, it just resists easy answers. It defies closure.
It really does.
And in the absence of those concrete answers, the human mind, it tends to fill those gaps, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And I think the passage of time in a case like this, it often makes it even harder to separate those genuine leads from the noise, from people who are, maybe trying to capitalize on the tragedy, or perhaps even wrestling with their own troubled memories.
Yeah.
It becomes this tangled web of information, rumor, speculation.
And all that noise swirling around, it must make it so much tougher for investigators to stay focused on the facts, to follow the evidence wherever it may lead.
Absolutely.
But there was one development, it was relatively recently, and it really drives home how it continues to captivate both investigators and the public.
If you're talking about that factory search back in 2013.
That's the one.
Yeah.
That felt like such a huge deal at the time. To think that after all those years, there was a chance, however small, that they might actually find something, some answers.
It was huge. Based on new information that had come to light, authorities undertook they did a full-scale excavation.
Wow.
This new information suggested that the children's remains might be buried there at the site of this former factory. It was definitely a long shot,
Right.
but they felt it warranted a thorough investigation.
I can only imagine that mix of hope and anxiety surrounding that search, especially for the family.
Absolutely. And the fact that it garnered so much attention, even after all those years, it speaks volumes. It speaks to the enduring power of this case. That longing for answers, for some sense of closure, it just doesn't fade with time. Not for those directly affected, and not for a public that feels a collective sense of grief. Like a shared responsibility to never forget.
It reminds us that some cases, some stories, they burrow their way into our collective consciousness. Yeah. And they stay with us.
They really do. And with the Beaumont children, it wasn't just their disappearance that left a mark. It was this ripple effect it had on Australia as a whole. It's hard to overstate how deeply this case changed the national psyche. especially when it comes to, the safety and freedom of children.
Because before the Beaumont children vanished,
Hmm.
things were different, right? There was a
Ah,
different sense of, I don't know, different sense of freedom, of trust within communities. Kids could just be kids.
yes. In the 1960s, especially in a place like Adelaide, children, they enjoyed a level of autonomy that might seem, I don't know, might seem unthinkable now.
Right.
Playing unsupervised in their neighborhoods, running errands for their parents, taking public transport alone. These were everyday occurrences.
Right.
Wasn't cause for alarm back then.
Right. Totally different time.
Yeah.
And the Beaumont children, I mean, from everything we know, they were no exception. They were responsible for their age, used to this level of independence. They knew Glenelg Beach. They knew the bus routes. And that's one of the things that makes their disappearance so chilling. It just shattered this sense of safety, this feeling of security in even the most familiar places.
Yeah.
It's like, gosh, you build up this sense of security,
Yeah.
this trust in the world around you. And when something like this happens, it just, I don't know, it shatters the illusion for everyone.
Yeah, you're right. It really does. And I think it's fair to say that this case, it became a turning point.
Hmm.
A tragic one, but a turning point nonetheless. People started questioning everything, wondering if the unthinkable could happen in their own backyard.
Right.
It really ignited this national conversation about stranger danger, about the vulnerability of children, and the urgent need for greater vigilance.
And I think you could argue that it changed, I don't know, maybe it changed the way we parent too. That sense of freedom that kids had back in the 60s, that freedom to just, I don't know, roam their neighborhoods, to play unsupervised, all of that, it kind of started to dwindle.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a sense, especially among those who are raising children around that time, that something fundamental shifted after the Beaumont children vanished.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, a kind of innocence was lost,
Right.
replaced by this heightened awareness, of the darkness that can sometimes lurk beneath the surface of everyday life.
It's a tough truth to grapple with.
It is, but it's a conversation that the Beaumont case forced us to have.
And it's a conversation that continues today, don't you think?
Yeah.
I mean, every time a missing child's case makes headlines, it's like that wound reopens,
Right.
that collective sense of unease. And you find yourself wondering, could this be another Beaumont case? Will we ever get answers?
Yeah. And I think it speaks to the profound impact that this case had and continues to have on society as a whole.
Mm.
It's a reminder, a stark reminder, really, that despite all the advancements we've made, some mysteries just endure.
They really do. It's like that old saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah.
We have access to more information now than ever before.
Yeah.
Technology at our fingertips.
Right.
But some things, like what happened to Jane, or Arna, and Grant Beaumont, they remain frustratingly out of reach.
It's a tough pill to swallow, isn't it? Especially in this day and age. I mean, we're so used to instant gratification,
Right.
to mysteries being solved with, I don't know, a DNA test or a few clicks on a computer.
Yeah, it's true.
But the Beaumont case, I think it reminds us that some stories they defy those easy solutions, that sometimes, no matter how desperately we want those answers we're looking for, they remain elusive.
Yeah. It's a stark reminder that, real life isn't a neatly plotted crime drama. There are loose ends. There are unanswered questions. And that not knowing that, gosh, that lingering uncertainty, it can be incredibly difficult to live with.
It really can. But perhaps, and I don't know, maybe this is wishful thinking, but perhaps there's something to be said for, I don't know, for sitting with that discomfort, for acknowledging the limits of our own understanding. The Beaumont case, in its own tragic way, I think it forces us to confront the unknown.
Yeah.
To accept that some questions may never have definitive answers.
It's a humbling thought, that's for sure. But it also feels, I don't know, feels like a bit of a disservice to end this deep dive on such a heavy note. I mean, the Beaumont children, their story, it's heartbreaking, absolutely.
Right.
But it sparked this national conversation. It changed the way we think about child safety, and it left this indelible mark on Australia's collective memory.
It did. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe that's the most enduring legacy of the Beaumont children's disappearance. It serves as this poignant reminder to cherish our loved ones, to really appreciate the preciousness and the fragility of life, and to never, ever stop seeking answers, even in the face of unimaginable tragedy.
It's so true. It's a case that it stays with you. It prompts reflection, it sparks conversations, and it reminds us that some mysteries never truly disappear. They become a part of our shared history. woven into the fabric of, I don't know, of who we are, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.